And now I will call Dr. Fahim Yunus Quraishi Sahib, who will speak on the topic of brotherhood and obedience.
Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'du fa'auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. إنما المؤمنون إخوة فأصلحوا بين أخويكم واتقوا الله لعلكم ترحمون. Surely all believers are brothers, so make peace between your brothers and fear Allah, that mercy may be shown to you. My dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Let me tell you first that I came to America in 1996, leaving all my family, my brothers and sisters, everybody back home in Pakistan. I have 3 brothers and I miss them. I miss them all the time. And those of you who live on the East Coast, you remember it was the year of the big snow. So I had a lot of time to sit home, ponder, and reconsider everything in my life. And despite a born Ahmadi, the days to come were to force me to read everything one more time, to reconsider, to just go over those conditions of Bai'at that I always knew and reanalyze them. Those of you sitting here must be wondering, where's the connection? What's the point of my personal life with the conditions of Bai'at, with the topic of my speech, which is brotherhood and obedience? Let me start by requesting that I will try to explain the first connection now, and I will explain the second connection in about 10 minutes. When I started reading the conditions of Bai'at, and I will request you to get your attention towards the 10th conditions of Bai'at, where Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam says that he shall enter into a bond of brotherhood with this humble servant. This humble servant of God, pledging obedience to me in everything good. This is not a coincidental choice of words, and this is not a coincidental sequence of language either. I have to tell you that I will be talking about a very particular brand, a very particular subtype of obedience today, because it's a vast topic. Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam first asks us for a bond of brotherhood, and then goes on to ask for a pledge of obedience. There has to be some wisdom in it. The way I see it, that if you think of brotherhood like a tree full of leaves, and then the shade of that tree is the obedience. It's an effortless phenomenon. You shouldn't have to worry about it. You shouldn't have to work for it. It comes to you automatically. And when I try to apply that concept on the history of Islam, I was fascinated, to say the least. Because whenever I looked at an exemplary obedience, all those examples of obedience that we've always heard, I found an exemplary brotherhood with that. Let's start from the Awwaleen. Let's start 1400 years ago. We all know Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought the true message of Islam. And the whole Mecca knew he was Sadiq and Ameen. Whole Mecca, everybody knew he was Sadiq, he was Ameen. But then why Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq raziyallahu ta'ala anhu, why Hazrat Ali raziyallahu ta'ala anhu, and why Hazrat Khadija raziyallahu ta'ala anha were the first of the believers? Probably because they had a bond of love, a bond of brotherhood, a bond of kinship with Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it took them a second to pledge that obedience. Let's go to the time of Badr, to be exact, 1382 years ago. That's the time when Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was trying to find the commitment of his Muhajireen and Ansar before the battle. And one of the Ansar Sahabi whose name was Hazrat Saad bin Muaz Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, he figured that out and he said, अब जब कि हमने अपना हाथ आपके हाथ में दे दिया है, तो जहां चाहे हमें ले चले. He says, Ya Rasulullah, now that we've given our hand in your hand, you take us wherever you wish. And we swear upon that Allah who has stationed you with truth, that if you ask all of us to jump in the ocean, all of us will jump and not a single one of us will stay behind. What is that? Is that obedience? Is that brotherhood? I'm at a loss. Help me. But then let's go a year ahead. The time of Uhud. Most of us think of that one sad incident of disobedience. But even at the time of Uhud, when the enemy had when the Muslim army had sustained heavy losses, look at what Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was doing. He's going over those mutilated bodies, trying to identify them. And the first body that he can recognize is Hazrat Hamza, his uncle. The next body he goes over is Hazrat Abdullah, his cousin. And that's the time when you think of Hazrat Saad bin al-Rabi Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, who was one of the chiefs of Ansar. Imagine this is a prophet whose family is slaughtered in front of him, and he's thinking of a brother who he remembered during the battle was surrounded by enemies. And he goes and asks another Sahabi that go look for Saad, because he's worried about him. Hazrat Abi Ka'b Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu goes around over those mutilated bodies looking for Hazrat Saad. And he's screaming at the top of his lungs, "Oh Saad, where are you? Oh Saad, can you hear me?" And he goes on over those mutilated bodies and he's unable to locate Hazrat Saad. As it turns out, Hazrat Saad bin al-Rabi was alive. And he was badly wounded and did not have the energy to respond to that call. And Hazrat Abi Ka'b one more time says, "Oh Saad, can you hear me?" And then he's almost ready to give up that search and he's trying to turn back. And that's when it hits him that I have not relayed the right message. And one last time he goes, "Oh Saad, can you hear me? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is asking for you. He's looking for you." And that is the time when Hazrat Saad says that a flicker of energy came into his body and he said, "Yes, I can hear you." Hazrat Ka'b approaches him and he says, "Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is looking for you." And Hazrat Saad says, "My brother, I don't have the energy. Say my salam to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And say my salam to my other Muslim brothers and go tell the brothers of my tribe that if anything happens to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in their lives, they will have no excuse in front of Allah." This was the love of the followers of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hazrat Muhammad, come on brothers like Ahmadi Muslim brothers, Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, was this your obedience or was this your love to the man for whom this whole universe was created? And then let's talk about the Akhirin. And by the grace of Allah, you are all among the Akhirin. Going back to 115 years ago, no discussion on obedience or brotherhood will be complete without the name Nuruddin, our beloved Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Awwal Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu. And I know you've heard his examples of obedience and his examples of brotherhood over and over again. So today I would like to focus the attention on that bond of brotherhood that existed between Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam and Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Awwal. Do you know the first time Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Awwal Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu met Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam? It was way before his bai'at. He had not even done his bai'at yet. So technically speaking, there was no pledge of allegiance yet. And he goes on to Qadian looking for Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ. And while he's trying to enter the house, there's a man who's coming down from the staircase. And Khalifatul Masih al-Awwal have no idea who this man is, but he looks at him and he says, मेरे दिल में यह ख्याल पैदा हुआ कि यकीनन यही मिर्जा है, हजरत मसीह मौद अलैहिस्सलाम, और इस पर मैं सारा ही कुर्बान हो जाऊं. This was the degree of his love before the Bai'at. This is the man who's seeing him for the first time, and he says that it was put in my heart that surely this is Mirza, this is Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ, and I wish I could sacrifice my life on him. Hasn't even spoken a word yet. And then how does Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ reciprocate? He says, Nuruddin is the summary of all my sincere friends. He is the summary of all my sincere friends. Then he says at other place, when I look at Nuruddin, I feel such a joy as if I have found a lost limb. And then listen to this. He says, "Wo mere Rabb ki ayat mein se ek ayat hai." That's a tribute that the Imam of this time gives to his brother, that he is a verse out of all the verses of Quran for me. That's what Nuruddin is. And he follows me like pulse follows the breathing and circulation. That's the relationship. When you have a relationship like that, how can you think of disobedience? How can obedience can even become a chore? How does it even enter the equation? In the end, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Awwal used to say during his years of Khilafat that you know that Nuruddin's beloved used to live here. He's referring to Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ and Qadian. That Nuruddin's beloved used to live here. His name was Mirza. And Nuruddin used to follow him with such passion that he did not care where his shoes were and where his turban was. That is the kind of obedience, that is the kind of brotherhood. When you have a tree of brotherhood like that, why won't you have a shade? And you can look at the shade, and without looking at the tree, you can tell how dense this tree must be. But some people may think, or let me rephrase it, there's a shaitan out there. And that shaitan may put a waswasa in someone's mind, well, these are the prophets of Allah. We are common man, so our degree of obedience can never be that. Let me break that myth as well. 21 years ago, when our beloved Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi Rahmullah was on his way from Pakistan to London, our very dear Imam Atal Mujib Rashid Saab, you must have seen him on MTA 1,000 times, in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. receives a phone call. He picks up the phone, and the voice on the other side from Rabwa is telling him, get ready. Imam Saab recognizes the voice and says, I am ready, but for what? And that's when he's told that Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi Rahmullah is on his way to London. Imagine, my brothers, 3 a.m. in the middle of the night. The first thing Imam Saab does, kneels down in front of Allah for shukrana, for nawafil. And the next thing he does, he literally moves his house in the middle of the night. He says, in bed sheets go all our belongings. And they literally emptied their house, they emptied the office. And by 4:30, in 1.5 hours, they had a meeting of all the officials. And by noon, when Hazur arrives in the masjid is buzzing with 300 Ahmadis. There is no order yet. Khalifa is on his way, he hasn't even said a word, and where did these 300 brothers come from? What kind of do you call this obedience? But they are there, or you call it brotherhood. And then the years to come were to witness the transformation that the presence of that Khalifa created for London. I'm very aware of that shaitan who's still out there, who may think and put another waswasa in your mind, well, this is still Khalifatul Masih. He's way beyond your reach. You're never going to be like that. So let me tell you something which happened during this year. We started 1400 years ago from the time of Awwaleen, and we are now in the time of Akhiri. A few months ago, one of the Western countries in the world, you know this is the season of Ijtamaat and Jalsas, and they were having a discussion about where to hold their national Ijtima of Khudam al-Ahmadiyya. And of course, when you have a group, there are people who have different opinions. And that's what Shaitan loves. That's where you are vulnerable. When there is a disagreement, that's where the vulnerability is. So of course, these brothers, half of them said, do it in this city. The other half said, no, do it in this city. And Sadr Sahib had to make a decision. So he said, okay, the Ijtima will be in this city. Now, how did the brothers from the other city respond? Did they say that, you did not give me the chance of holding this Ijtima, so I'm not a part of it? Or did they say, what can we do? And that's exactly how it occurred. They said, Samyana wa ata'ana, amanna wa saddaqna. Now that you made a decision, which apparently is not in our favor, but tell us, what can we do? And the character of the majlis where the Ijtima was going to be held, they did not say that now we are the owners of this Ijtima, so we will do it. They said, yes, you are our brothers. Come on, and we will work together. And then the day of the Ijtima, you saw one majlis doing the ziyafat, and you saw another majlis doing the transportation. You saw one majlis doing the photography, and you saw the other majlis doing the program planning, and you saw one majlis doing the wakare amal, and you saw the other majlis doing something else. And what we witnessed was an absolute example of brotherhood. Why I give you these examples? By no stretch of imagination, I'm saying that we are comparable to the shan of those Sahaba who are our models, our role models. All I'm trying to tell you, my brothers, that it is my firm belief that the God of Ahmadiyyat and Islam is a living God, and that the Khilafat of Islam and Ahmadiyyat is a living Khilafat. So similarly, the brotherhood and obedience of Islam and Ahmadiyyat is a living brotherhood and a living obedience. It's not an abstract idea that exists only in the history books. Why sometimes then we have disagreements? Why sometimes we tend to go too far? That's again because there's a shaitan out there. There's a shaitan out there, and remember, he never said to Allah Ta'ala that do not create Adam. All he said was that I'm not going to submit, or I'm not going to be a part of it, under a perception of being superior. Not a reality, a perception of being superior, and he goes on to say, I'm not going to be a part of it. So that's exactly what he infuses in our minds. Go say you're not going to be a part of it. When we say, I'm not going to be a part of it, that is an act of self-destruction. Let me tell you what I mean by that. The word anfusakum is mentioned at the very least at 45 places in Holy Quran. It's a very profound word, has multiple meanings, but most of the time it means yourself or each other. I'll give you two examples. Allah Ta'ala says, وَلَا تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ in Surah Al-Hujurat. Do not defame each other. And وَلَا تَقْتِلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ, do not kill each other. The same verses can be read as do not defame yourself, or do not defame each other, or do not kill yourself, or do not kill each other. It's an act of self-destruction, because when you defame a brother, you like it or not, no matter how justified you are, you will end up defaming yourself in that process. Therefore, I say that this is an act of self-destruction. And as Ahmadi Muslims and Ahmadi Muslim brothers, can we afford it? Can we afford to let this shaitan come within our ranks, infiltrate among our lines and say, don't be a part of it? اے میرے درخت وجود کی سرسب شاخو, Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ says, O ye the green saplings of my tree. Are you going to allow that shaitan to cut those green saplings? Are you going to say, I'm not going to be a part of it? Look at what's happening in Pakistan. Look at what's happening in Bangladesh. Look at what's happening in Indonesia. Can you afford to say that I'm not going to be a part of it? But when you are united, then Allah Ta'ala has a promise for you. Allah Ta'ala has a profound reward for you, because in Surah Al-Hashr, we don't have to worry about what's happening in Pakistan and in Bangladesh and Indonesia, because our God is with us. And He says in Surah Al-Hashr that you think these enemies to be united while their hearts are divided. So you don't have to worry about it. But then what if we are united? What is the message of Allah for us? His message is, again, in Surah Anfal, Allah Ta'ala says that if there be 20 of you who are steadfast, they will overcome 200. And if there be 100 of you who are steadfast, they will overcome 1,000. Come on, brothers, we are millions. We are millions. So why are we afraid, and what are we afraid of? And this was that second part of my story. This is why I told you in the beginning, yes, my 3 brothers are still in Pakistan. Yes, I still miss them. But look at this. Look at this. I have hundreds of brothers. I have thousands of brothers. And this is the fruit of that bond with Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam. This is the fruit of that bond with Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And look at the shade of obedience we create when we are standing together for prayers. Try to go in the space and try to look at those rows of prayers from space and see what the kind of shade of obedience that we create. 8 days ago, I listened to Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis, Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz's sermon from Germany. And I have to admit, I listened it with a very heavy heart. And I'm sure you also listened to it with a very heavy heart. Our Imam is not asking us to take out swords, and our Imam is not asking us to throw our lives. All he is saying is forgive each other. All he is saying is love each other. Develop a bond of brotherhood. Is that too much to ask? Is that something that he should have to ask over and over again? And let me quote the exact words of Huzur with a very, very heavy heart. He says that ye jalsa baaz phate hue dilon mein muhabbatein paida karne ka bais ban jaye. That this jalsa becomes a source of love between those hearts that are divided right now. So let the shaitan and the opponents of Islam and Ahmadiyyat know that their evil plans will never succeed. For they are planning against the will of Allah, and Allah is the best of the planners. And let's walk in the footsteps of Hazrat Sa'ad bin Muaz and reassure our Imam that if he asks us to jump in the ocean of love and brotherhood, for God's sake we will all jump and not a single one of us will stay behind. So what's the take-home message? Once again, I would like to reiterate, most historic obediences are in reality historic brotherhoods. If you want to be an example from the Akhareen to match the Awwaleen, and you want to be a historic obedient, then you have to be a historic brother. And then see the shade of that tree of your brotherhood. That obedience will be effortless. It will not cost you a dime. You won't even feel it. And it will come to you. And let's be very, very mindful of that shaitan who is going to try to infiltrate our ranks, who is almost always going to give you a perception of superiority. Because that's what he had. And who's never going to tell you that stand up and say, don't do it. He's only going to say, don't be a part of it. You don't have to be a part of that Waqar Amal because you are above that. You don't have to be a part of that Tabligh plan because nobody sought your opinion. Or you don't have to be a part of that financial sacrifice scheme because you don't agree with it. That's how that shaitan is going to come to you. And he's going to make it look beautiful. So you have to be very, very aware of it. And in the end, it's not easy. It's very easy to make a speech. It's very easy to say words. But what Huzur is asking us is action. He's asking us for a material change in our behavior. He's asking us for a paradigm shift. And for that, my brothers, dil bada karna padta hai. Dil bada karna padta hai. You have to have a big heart. You have to have a warm heart. You have to have a heart that forgives another brother. And let me ask you one last thing. In fact, let me request one last thing. Or let me beg one last thing. That let's relive the wish of Hazrat Saad bin al-Rabi, who at his dying, in the situation when he was breathing his last breaths, he said salam to his brothers. Let me request you that we will spend the rest of this jalsa, the rest of these approximately 27 hours, saying salam to our brothers, particularly going to those brothers who we historically do not go to, or a brother where that shaitan may have infiltrated your mind and may have asked you to hold a grudge. Let's promise that we will step up to that brother. We, the Akhareen, will do that, and we will do that in the next 27 hours, so our words can be transformed into actions. And we don't have a second chance. Let me conclude this with the sayings of Hazrat Promise Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam from Kashti-e-Nuh. And I have to reiterate, my brothers, we do not have a second chance. This is not something we can put for the future. This is not something that can wait. This is not something where you have to go and consult your family or friends, because that's how shaitan is again going to infiltrate our ranks. And let me tell you why we do not have a second chance. In the words of Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam, Huzur says, if you desire that even angels should praise you in the heavens, then suffer in the path of Allah with grace and remain cheerful. Hear abuse and remain grateful. And despite frustrations, do not break your ties. Listen to the words, my brothers. Despite frustrations, do not break your ties, because you are the last people raised by God. You are the last people raised by God, so do such deeds of piety as to touch the loftiest standards of excellence. I thank you for your attention. Jazakumullah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.